My father never said, I love you, not once, not in words, not when I was a child, not when I was growing up, not even when I left home for the first time, and for a long time. I thought that meant something. I thought it meant he didn't feel it, because how could someone love you and never say it? I used to watch other families, friends at school, people in movies, fathers who hugged their children, who said, I'm proud of you, who smiled easily. And I would wonder, what does that feel like? Because in my house, things were different. Not cold, not harsh, just quiet. My father was always there, but never expressive. He woke up early every morning, before the sun. I remember hearing the sound of the door opening, soft footsteps, the faint noise of a cup being placed on the table. He would drink his coffee alone, in silence. Then he would leave for work, every day, without fail. And when he came home, he didn't say much. How was school? He would ask. Good, I would reply. Did you eat? He would ask. Yes. Short questions, short answers. Then silence. It became a pattern, a rhythm, one that I accepted without really understanding. As a child, I didn't question it much because children don't always know what is missing. They just live inside what is given. But as I grew older, I began to notice the difference between my home and the world outside. I saw how other fathers laughed, how they spoke freely, how they showed affection, and slowly, a quiet question began to grow inside me. Why not mine? Why doesn't he say anything? Why does he feel so far? I never asked him directly because something inside me held back. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was pride, or maybe I had already decided that he wouldn't answer. So I stayed quiet, just like him. Years passed that way, not dramatically, not painfully, just quietly. We lived in the same house, shared the same space, but rarely shared what was inside. I remember one evening, more clearly than the others. I was sitting at the table, books open in front of me, trying to study, but my mind kept drifting. I had just received my exam results that day. Not bad, not terrible, but not good either. And for some reason, it bothered me more than I expected. Not because of the numbers, but because of what I thought they meant, that I wasn't enough, that I hadn't done well, that maybe I would disappoint someone, even though no one had said that. The door opened. I didn't look up. I knew it was him. His steps were always the same, measured, steady. He walked into the room, paused for a moment, then asked, How was school? I hesitated, just for a second, then gave the usual answer. Fine. He didn't say anything else. I heard him move slightly, put something down, then silence. Again, but this time it felt heavier because I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him about the results, about how I felt, but the words stayed inside, stuck somewhere between thought and voice. He sat down across from me, not too close, not too far, just there, present, but quiet. I kept looking at my book, pretending to read, pretending everything was normal. A few minutes passed. Then he spoke again. You're studying late, he said. I nodded slightly. Yes, another pause. Then he added, That's good. That's good. Two simple words, but something about them felt incomplete, like they were trying to say more, but stopped halfway. I waited, but nothing followed, just silence again. And in that silence, I felt something I couldn't explain at the time. A distance, not physical, but emotional. Like there was something between us that neither of us knew how to cross. That night, I stayed at the table long after he left, looking at the same page, not reading, just thinking. And a thought came to me quietly, but clearly. Maybe this is just who he is. Maybe he doesn't know how to say more. Maybe he doesn't feel more. That idea stayed with me, not loudly, but consistently. Over time, it became something I believed, not because it was proven, but because it was never challenged. Years went by, I finished school, moved forward, life continued. But that quiet space between us never really changed. We spoke when needed, shared practical things, but never calm feelings, never the deeper parts. And slowly, I stopped expecting it, stopped waiting for words. That never came until one day, something unexpected happened. Not dramatic, not sudden, just a moment, a small moment. That would change everything I thought I knew. But at the time, I didn't know that yet. At the time, it felt like just another quiet day, like all the others. And maybe that's why it mattered so much. The day began like any other, quiet, ordinary. Nothing in the air suggested that anything would change. I woke up at the usual time. The house was still. That familiar silence, the one I had known for years, was there again. I walked into the kitchen, and as always, he was already there, sitting in the same chair, a cup of coffee in front of him, steam rising slowly into the quiet morning. He didn't look surprised to see me. He never did. "You're up early," he said. I nodded. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. He didn't ask why, just gave a small nod, and took another sip of his coffee. We stood there, in the same room, sharing the same space, but not much else. I poured myself a glass of water. The sound echoed softly, too loud for such a quiet moment. I leaned against the counter, thinking about what to say or whether to say anything at all. There were so many things. I could have asked him simple things about his day, his work, even about himself. But the habit of silence is a strong one. It doesn't disappear easily, so instead, I said nothing, just like always. A few minutes passed. Then he stood up. "I'll be back late today," he said. I looked at him. "Work?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes." A short answer, as expected. He picked up his keys, paused for a moment near the door, as if he might say something else, but he didn't. He just left, and the house returned to silence again. Later that day, I went out, walking without a clear direction, just moving to clear my mind. The streets were calm, people passing by, each person carrying their own thoughts, their own lives. I wondered what their families were like, what their conversations sounded like, if they said things that we never did. The thought stayed with me as I walked until my phone rang. I looked down. His name. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to answer, but because it was unusual. He didn't call often, not without a reason. I picked up. "Hello," I said. There was a brief pause, then his voice. "Where are you?" he asked. I stopped walking. "Just outside," I said. "Why?" Another pause, longer this time. Then he said something that felt different. "Can you come home?" His voice was calm, but something in it was not the same. Not urgent, not loud, but heavier. "I'm on my way," I said. He didn't say anything else. The call ended, and for a moment, I just stood there, holding the phone, feeling something I couldn't quite name. Not fear, not worry, just uncertainty. I turned around and began walking back. And faster this time. The familiar streets felt different now, like something had shifted, even before I understood what it was. When I reached the house, the door was slightly open. That was unusual. He always closed it. Always. I pushed it gently and stepped inside. The house was quiet, but not in the usual way. This silence felt tense, like something was waiting. "Dad?" I called softly. No answer. I moved further inside, each step slow, careful. Then I saw him, sitting in the living room, not moving much, just sitting there. His posture slightly different, not relaxed, not tense, just still. I walked closer. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I noticed something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Not clearly, not fully, but enough to feel it. Something deeper, something unspoken. "I'm fine," he said, but the words didn't feel complete. I stood there, waiting, because this time I knew there was more. And maybe, for the first time, he knew it too. "There's something I need to do," he added. I didn't interrupt, just listened. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "I need you to come with me," he said, "to the hospital." The words stayed in the air, quiet, heavy. "Why?" I asked softly. He hesitated, just for a second, then answered, "Just come with me." Not an explanation, not a full answer, but something in his voice told me not to ask more, not now. So I nodded. "Okay," I said. We left the house together, side by side, walking toward the car, the same path we had taken many times before. But this time, it felt different. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was full of questions, full of things we hadn't said yet. And as we drove, I realized something slowly, something I had never considered before. Maybe it wasn't that he had nothing to say. Maybe he just didn't know how. And maybe today, that was about to change. The car moved slowly through the streets, not because of traffic, but because neither of us was in a hurry to speak. The engine hummed quietly, a steady sound filling the space between us. I looked out the window, watching the city pass by, people walking, lights changing, life continuing, as if nothing had shifted. But inside the car, everything felt different. I glanced at him for a moment. His hands were steady on the wheel, his eyes focused ahead, the same as always. And yet, not the same. There was something in his expression, something heavier, something more distant, or maybe more present. I couldn't tell. I wanted to ask again. Why the hospital? What was going on? But the question stayed inside, because something told me this was not the moment to push. This was the moment to stay quiet and listen. Even if no words were spoken, after a while, he spoke. We haven't been there in a long time," he said. His voice was calm, low. I turned slightly toward him. "Where?" I asked. A small pause. Then he said, "Your grandfather." The words settled slowly. I blinked, processing. "My grandfather?" I repeated. He nodded. "Yes." Another pause. I searched my memory, trying to remember the last time we had visited. It had been years, too many to count easily. "Is he okay?" I asked carefully. He didn't answer right away. The car continued moving. The road stretched ahead. Then, finally, "I don't know," he said. 3 simple words. But unlike before, they didn't feel distant. They felt honest, uncertain, and somehow that felt new. I looked down at my hands, thinking. I had never known my grandfather well. Not really. He was someone who existed in the background, a quiet figure. Like my father, visits had always been short, conversations even shorter. I remembered sitting in a small room, watching the two of them, my father and his father, sitting together in almost complete silence. At the time, I thought it was normal. Now, I wasn't so sure. The car turned slowly, entering a quieter street. Trees lined the road, tall, still. The hospital building appeared ahead, simple, unremarkable, but something about it made everything feel more serious. We parked in silence, turned off the engine, and for a moment, neither of us moved, just sat there, breathing. Then he reached for the door. "We should go," he said. I nodded. "Okay." We stepped out of the car. The air felt cooler here, quieter, as if the world slowed down. Just a little. We walked toward the entrance, side by side, our steps soft, measured. Inside, the smell of the hospital greeted us. Clean, familiar. A place where time feels different, where moments stretch longer, and words carry more weight. We walked down the hallway, past rooms, past people, each door holding its own story, its own quiet tension. We stopped in front of one room. He didn't enter immediately, just stood there, looking at the door, as if gathering something inside himself. I waited, not speaking, because I understood now. This moment mattered. More than anything he had said before, he reached for the handle, paused, then opened the door slowly. We stepped inside. The room was quiet, dim light, a soft sound from a machine, marking time in a different way. And there, lying on the bed, was my grandfather, smaller than I remembered, weaker, still. For a moment, I didn't move, didn't speak, because something about seeing him like this shifted something inside me. My father stepped forward first, slowly, carefully, as if each step required effort. He stood beside the bed, looking down, and I saw it again. That expression in his eyes, not distant, not quiet in the same way as before, but full, full of something he had never shown, at least not to me. I stayed a little behind, watching, listening. Even though no words had been spoken yet, he reached out his hand, hesitated for a second, then gently placed it on his father's arm. A simple gesture, but one I had never seen before. Not from him, not like this. The room remained silent. But it was no longer empty. It was filled with everything that had never been said. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt unclear. Then he spoke, softly, almost like he wasn't used to hearing his own voice in this way. "I'm here," he said. The words were quiet, but they carried something deep, something that had been waiting for a very long time. I stood there, not moving, because I realized something slowly, something I had never fully understood before. Silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes it holds everything that hasn't found its way into words yet. And in that room, for the first time, I began to see my father, not as distant, not as someone who didn't feel, but as someone who had simply never learned how to show it. And maybe this moment was the beginning of that change. The room stayed quiet, not the kind of silence I had always known, but something deeper, something that held weight, something that asked to be felt, not filled. I stood near the door, not too close, not too far, watching. My father didn't move much, his hand still resting gently on his father's arm. As if that simple touch was enough to say something important. The machine beside the bed continued its soft rhythm, a steady sound, marking time in a way that felt both slow and fragile. I looked at my grandfather's face. His eyes were closed, his breathing light, almost like he was somewhere else, just beyond reach. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what my father saw when he looked at him, not just now, but all those years before. What kind of man had he been? What kind of father? The thought stayed with me as I watched them together, two men, so similar in their silence, so close, yet separated by something invisible, something that had never been spoken. My father shifted slightly, pulled a chair closer, sat down beside the bed, slowly, carefully, as if each movement carried meaning. I had never seen him like this before, not at home, not anywhere. There was no distance in him now, no walls, just presence, just being there. He looked at his father again for a long moment. Then his voice came, soft, but clearer this time. "You always worked a lot," he said. The words were simple, but they felt like the beginning of something larger. "I remember waiting for you," he continued. A pause. "I didn't say anything." Another pause. I thought that was normal. I felt something shift inside me because those words felt familiar, not from him, but from my own thoughts, from my own past. He exhaled slowly, his hand still steady. "I think I became the same," he said. The room held that sentence gently, like it understood its weight, like it had been waiting for those words to exist. I took a small step closer, not interrupting, just listening, because this moment felt like something rare, something fragile, something that might disappear if touched too quickly. "I didn't know how to say things," he continued, his voice lower now, almost uncertain. "I didn't know how to show them." He paused, looking down briefly, then back at his father. "But I felt them." That sentence stayed in the air, clear, honest, and for the first time, I understood something I had missed for years. It was never about the absence of feeling. It was about the absence of expression, and those are not the same, not at all. My father leaned forward slightly, closer now, as if the distance between them was something he wanted to close before it was too late. "I don't know if you knew that," he said. A small pause. "Maybe you did." Silence again. But this silence was different. It wasn't avoidance. It wasn't distance. It was space for truth, uncomfortable, but necessary. I felt my chest tighten slightly because I realized something else, something even more personal. If he didn't know how to say these things to his own father, how could he have known how to say them to me? The thought didn't bring anger. Not anymore. It brought understanding. Slow, but steady. My father's voice came again, quieter now. "I wish I had said more," he said. The words were almost a whisper. "I wish I had asked more." Another pause. "I wish I had listened better." Each sentence felt like a door opening, one after another, revealing something that had always been there, but never seen. I stood there, feeling something shift inside me too. A kind of release, a quiet realization that the distance I had felt for so long was not intentional. It was inherited, passed down, through silence, through habits, through years of not knowing another way. My father took a deeper breath. His hand moved slightly, holding his father's arm more firmly now, and as if trying to hold on to something before it slipped away. "I'm here now," he said again, stronger this time, more certain. "I'm here." The words were no longer just spoken. They were meant, fully. And in that moment, I understood something that changed everything for me. Love does not always arrive in the way we expect. Sometimes it is not spoken early. Sometimes it is not shown easily. Sometimes it waits. It waits for the right moment, the right understanding, the right courage. And when it finally comes, it carries the weight of everything that came before. I stepped a little closer, now standing beside him, not behind, not distant, but next to him, where I belonged. He didn't look at me right away, but I could feel it. He knew I was there. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something new, not just between him and his father, but between him and me. A quiet beginning, but a real one. The room remained still, not empty, but full of something that didn't need noise. I stood beside my father, closer now than I had ever been, not just in distance, but in understanding. He didn't look at me right away. His attention was still on his father, but something had already changed. I could feel it. Not in words, not yet, but in presence, in the way he stayed, in the way he no longer held back from what he was feeling. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time felt softer here, less structured, more like something we were inside, rather than something we were measuring. The quiet sound of breathing, the gentle rhythm of the machine, life continuing in a fragile way. My father slowly leaned back in his chair, his hand still resting on the bed, not gripping, not tense, just there, as if letting go and holding on at the same time. Then, for the first time since we entered the room, he turned his head slightly and looked at me, really looked. Not the quick passing glance I was used to, not the practical attention of everyday life, but something deeper, something intentional. And in that look, I saw something I had been waiting for, without even knowing it. Not words, not yet, but recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that I was not just there, but with him in that moment, sharing it. Neither of us spoke at first, because somehow we didn't need to. The silence between us was no longer a wall, it was a bridge, something we were both standing on, carefully, but together. He took a small breath, as if preparing himself, not for something big, but for something honest. I used to think, he began slowly, then paused. I waited, giving him space. I used to think that if I worked hard, that was enough, he said. His voice was calm, but softer than I had ever heard it. That if I did what I was supposed to do, you would understand. A small pause, that you would know. The words settled gently, and for the first time, I didn't feel confusion hearing them. I felt clarity, because I understood now what he had been trying to give, even without words. I didn't always understand, I said quietly. My voice felt different too, less guarded, more open. He nodded slightly. I know, he replied. Not defensive, not distant, just accepting. I didn't make it easy, he added. A simple sentence, but one that carried years inside it. I felt something shift again. But this time, it wasn't heavy, it was light, like something was being released, without effort. I thought you didn't feel things, I said. The words came out softly, not accusing, just honest. He looked at me, and for a moment, there was a faint smile, and not of amusement, but of understanding. I felt everything, he said, a small pause. I just didn't know how to show it. That sentence answered a question I had carried for years, quietly, deeply, and suddenly, it didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like something found. We stood there, in that quiet room, no longer separated by what we hadn't said, but connected by what we finally had. He looked back at his father, his expression softer now, less burdened, as if something inside him had settled. Then, almost without thinking, he spoke again, but this time, his voice was even quieter, even more careful. "I love you," he said. The words were simple, but they changed everything. Not because they were loud, not because they were dramatic, but because they were real, because they had waited for so long. I felt my breath pause slightly, not in shock, but in recognition, because in that moment, those words were not just for his father. They were for all the moments before, all the silence, all the distance, all the things that had never been said until now. And somehow, I felt them too, not directly, not spoken to me, but present, clear, alive in the room. My father didn't move after saying it. He didn't repeat it. He didn't explain it. He just let it exist. And that was enough, more than enough. We stayed there for a while longer, not speaking much, not needing to, because something important had already happened, and something that didn't require more words. Eventually, we stepped out of the room, back into the quiet hallway, the same place, but not the same feeling. We walked side by side again, but this time, the silence between us felt different, lighter, easier. As we reached the exit, he paused, just for a moment. Then he looked at me, not uncertain, not distant, but steady, and in a voice that was still quiet, but no longer hesitant, he said something I had never heard before. "I'm glad you came." I nodded slowly. "Me too," I replied. We stepped outside. The air felt different now. Or maybe we were. We walked toward the car, no rush, no pressure, just moving forward, together. And I realized something as we did. Some people don't say "I love you" easily, not because they don't feel it, but because they were never taught how. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. Sometimes it's in the way they show up, the way they stay, the way they try, even when it's difficult. And sometimes it takes one unexpected moment for everything to finally be said. Thank you for listening, for staying with this quiet story. If you've ever wondered about the words that were never spoken in your life, maybe they are still there, waiting for the right moment. And if this story helped you feel something, even a small shift inside, then stay with us. Because through slow English, through quiet stories, we don't just learn language. We learn how to understand each other better.